What's up guys, Houndish here, and today Bungie held their live stream for Edge of Fate. Now, this is the second reveal that they've done in this format. Surprisingly, it did actually come with a short sort of Vidoc or trailer segment about Kepler itself, which is pretty welcome, given that we didn't know a whole ton about the destination. It is relatively spoiler-free though. Nonetheless, we'll talk about it. Otherwise, Bungie talk about gear tiering, armor stats, all of the sort of system reworks that they're introducing for rewards specifically. They also show off a new weapon archetype in the form of a heavy crossbow, which actually looks pretty wild, not something I was expecting to see. But another cool element. Then they clarify some things about artifacts, seasonal upgrades, introducing additional perks in major updates, and a bunch of other stuff, so we'll break it down in the video. If you guys enjoy it, a rating below really does help us. Otherwise, let's get into it. We do have a little video segment about Kepler, which we'll run in just a moment, but Bungie did speak about a new weapon archetype that they'll be introducing, which is a heavy crossbow. So we can see it on screen. They said they needed to differentiate this from linear fusion rifles, of course, as otherwise it would be a pretty similar weapon. They say we can hit a target and then pick up that bolt and reload it into the weapon. So technically, it is an infinite ammo weapon. It will be interesting to see what this can do with a bunch of different perks and bonuses in the game. The one they show off here is legendary. I'm not sure if we might get exotic variants. Probably will at some point in the future. And on this weapon type, they say they've replaced magazines with bolt types. So they gave a couple of examples. There's explosive bolt, which attaches to a target and then explodes. Not necessarily surprising. There are also serrated bolts, and this deals damage as it enters a target, but we can actually pull the bolts out of a target as well. And the serrated type of bolt will actually deal damage again when it exits an enemy. So pretty interesting new weapon type, I suppose. It looks quite cool in the gameplay, but I'm sure, like I said, with more perk combinations and some of the other mods and things, this could get pretty interesting. So share your thoughts on that. Obviously, it's just a brief look at this point. Otherwise, Bungie did play a video segment about Kepler itself. We'll run it in full right here instead of breaking it all down. I'm glad to see Bungie are using 60 FPS trailer footage again, which is nice. And they touch on the sort of layers and secrets that we'll find on Kepler, so here it is.
So Kepler's a place touched by the Nine, concealing a lot of secrets and danger. And it's somewhere that human scientists traveled to a long time ago to research a dormant singularity. While living on Kepler, not only did they observe the collapse, they survived it. And over time, the ideals of the scientific process they held to were enshrined in their culture, and they came to be known as the Ionians. The Elixni House of Exile arrived during the Dark Age, weary from the Long Drift. They didn't invade Earth with the other Elixni houses. Instead, they sought a new home, which they found alongside the Ionians. But the dark matter that permeates Kepler and that they converted into the ether they need to survive ended up being toxic. So when the Ionians failed to cure them, the house rose up under an archon, claiming to be blessed with prophetic sight. Now, the House of Exile is full of zealots, and they'll stand opposed to the Guardian as they walk the winding pathways of Kepler, learning more about what called them there in the first place. Guardian's paracausal power acts as a catalyst for the normally corrosive force of dark matter. These new powers will allow them to unlock long sealed passageways for the Ionians as they make their way to the singularity at the core of the planetoid.
So from the start, we focused on building Kepler as more of a dungeon-like destination. It expands on the interconnected world design of places like the Leviathan or the Shattered Throne.
As you fight your way across Kepler, you tap into dark matter abilities and unlock enemy tech that expands your navigation and aids you in combat. These are all about going places you would normally think are out of reach.
Matterspark has you turn into this wild ball of arc energy. It's like nothing we've done in Destiny before. The Mattermorph ability lets you twist the objects in the world around you.
With Relocator, you've essentially co-opted the Fallen's teleportation networks and can use it to cross gaps you wouldn't have even considered before.
It'll be the small tells, an open vent, a broken window, things you want to remember because you might be revisiting them later.
Abilities can be upgraded, so as you unlock new perks, you can chain them into your build crafting in clever ways.
By far, the most game-changing is one of Matterspark's upgrades. On Kepler, it lets you turn into Matterspark the same way you'd summon a sparrow, wherever and whenever. It will optimize not only exploration, but also combat on future playthroughs in super creative ways. There are tons of cool combinations. You can suspend an enemy with Matter Morph, bend a path up toward the sky, and then in mid-air, leap into Matter Spark to dash across the arena and arc chain a group of enemies.
The team has already seen players pairing abilities with different exotic perks and aspects to create some really crazy builds.
We know this is only the beginning and can't wait to see what happens once players get their hands on this kit.
Pretty cool segment right there. Obviously, Bungie didn't go into any additional sort of endgame elements without obviously spoiling anything. They did touch on Kepler sort of unlocking over time, us visiting different areas and then returning to them and finding new secrets on different world tiers. So there are elements which are very reminiscent to the Never in Heresy. And of course, we got a better look at some of the upgrades for abilities on Kepler, like the Matter Spark. So there will be actual individual perks that affect these abilities that will be unlocking over time as we play on Kepler. So let us know your thoughts about that. Otherwise, they spend a good amount of time talking about Armor 3.0. We've discussed a lot of the stat changes that are coming with that, but they do show the new stats, and we see the enhanced stat benefits, which are things like improved overshield health, and the weapon stat actually granting armor bonuses, so the large ammo brick chance is increased by 24% with the stats on this character, with primary and special damage increased by 3.6% in PvE, 1.5% in PvP, and heavy weapon damage increased by 2.4 in PvP and 1.5 in PvP. So the tooltips go into much more granular detail about how gear is actually affecting stats, which is definitely good. In terms of the weapon stat in PvP though, they did confirm if you want to go all in on weapon damage, which you can do for PvP, but it will be at the expense of your other abilities. They didn't give us specifics, but there will be trade-offs to make. They did say, however, that things could break and they'll continue to update the game, so that will be interesting. We also see that fragments will have new stats applied to them as well. Dev said some of the fragments in subclasses will actually improve the weapon stat, for instance, so that's another interesting component. Outside of the new heavy crossbow, though, they speak about new weapon archetypes, like the spread shot hand cannon, which fires shotgun pellets, which are close range and hard hitting. It will 2-tap in PvP, and of course features shotgun bonuses. Otherwise, there's the high impact longbow with over penetrating rounds that can kill multiple targets in a round, and apparently the damage on these is pretty significant too. And then there is the rocket assisted frame pulse, which is still a burst weapon, but it's almost more like a heavy machine gun type of thing in a way. They do say it does more damage than normal pulse rifles, but it is more ammo hungry as well. Then on the subject of gear tiers, they say the stat pool will depend on the tier of gear. So one of the positives about this, according to the devs, is that because tiers are tied to certain activity difficulties, you'll know exactly what level of gear you're actually going to get in terms of stats. So there'll no longer be that sort of terribly rolled artifice armor dropping from a difficult activity. Instead, we should know that if we play a certain activity, we're going to get roughly a certain tier of stats. So it's clearer and rewards time investment more than some other activities where, completing harder difficulties could still drop a very low stat armor. So they were sort of generally leading towards the harder the content you play, the more rewarding it will be, and the less sort of RNG you'll rely on, or at least you'll be getting better drops of rewards with a higher potential of actually having good rolls. So on that subject, they also speak about tiers on weapons, and they say tier 1 will get 1 trait in each slot with no enhancements, so basically like a baseline weapon we have now. Tier 3 will have enhanced traits and double traits, and then for tier 5 we'll get triple traits and enhancements on every single socket, which includes barrels, mags, origin traits, and mods. And I would imagine for tier 4, we'll probably just lose 1 or 2 of those enhancements. Devs do say, for existing weapons, if it's a good roll, it'll continue to be a good roll. The tier system won't automatically render it worse than it is now, but they say existing weapons are roughly equal to tier 3s in Edge of Fate, so they describe the tier system and having a tier 5 versus a tier 3 as more of a sort of cherry on top, as opposed to an absolute necessity to have. We'll have to see how that plays out in game. They also show the custom ornament and combat flares, and these combat flares will be a celebratory effect upon defeating targets, so kind of reminds me of the sweaty confetti type of thing as an additional sort of bonus for getting a certain tier of weapons. Otherwise, they talk about the new season bonus, so for gear with the teal icon, it'll identify that that's actually in the new gear pool. And in terms of stats from the artifact, on the armor side, we'll get a damage resistance bonus per piece equipped. So if it's 5 tier 1 armor pieces, we'll get a 5% damage resist. If it's 5 tier 5 pieces, we'll get a 15% damage resist bonus. So Definitely noticeable, especially in higher end content, but not necessarily an absolute necessity. Of course, these tiers apply to weapons as well, so they say the maximum additional damage for clarification for weapons will be at 10% and not 15%, as originally was shown in an earlier build that was in the creator videos, so the boost won't be quite as big as what we thought it would. But there's a little positive here for the new gear system, and they've said certain items from previous releases will also be featured into this, so it'll give an edge to our existing exotics. For instance, you could have a Whisper of the Worm in the featured pool, and that means it gets plus 10% damage via this bonus. That featured pool will change every 6 months, so it's not every exotic in the game, but an extra pool of things which will interact with the artifact at a given time and get extra bonuses because of it, which, like I said, will certainly make returning to some favorite exotics a bit more interesting. Otherwise, for the artifact, they say each major update will add another row of artifact perks, so that'll be similar to Acts expanding the artifact back in the episodes. For today though, guys, without going into much more granular detail about things that we kind of already know, of course, there'll be a few things we already knew that I've just mentioned, but those were the kind of bits of clarity and extra insight about these reward systems, and that summarizes Bungie's live reveal for today. Otherwise, they said next week we'll focus on the portal, power, and progression, so stay tuned for that one. I think overall, some players may feel a bit more positive about some of these systems after this reveal today. It's good to get extra clarification on how some of that stuff will work. Of course, there is anxiety about players having to regrind all of the gear in the game, or a significant amount of it, especially, I would say, actually for armor. At least in the early stages, that'll be a big part of the chase. But there's more info to come next week, so I'll keep you up to date. For the moment, give us your thoughts down below. If you found the video helpful, a rating really does help me out here as well. Otherwise though, cheers for watching, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.